Foxborough Rush coming at you on a Wednesday. And yes, the Patriots have been making some moves. They did this yesterday, the announcement that they signed cornerback Marcus Jones to a contract extension, 3 years, $36 million, makes him a top 3 highest paid slot cornerback in the National Football League. And he had a chance to talk about it, all dressed up as Sonic the Hedgehog. The Patriots on hand for their Halloween party for pediatric patients yesterday. And look, if you're Sonic, I guess you're feeling good, needless to say. You get dressed up, you spend some time with some kids who are facing a very difficult battle and a fight with cancer. And you're bringing them smiles, and you probably have a smile glued to your face if you're Marcus Jones because of the extension that he just signed. Foxborough Rush, I said, coming at you. We got a jam-packed show today. Keagan, Stiefel, Jade, McCarthy here with you. We are going to dive into the book about Belichick and Brady. We will have the author of it, Gary Myers, here with us. We'll do that coming up. Bottom of the hour here on Foxborough Rush. Of course, there's lots of talk about what the Patriots might do now that they're sitting there still atop the AFC East. How good is this team? We'll get into that a little bit. But let's start with the moves that they've made, because there are a few of them, Keagan. And first and foremost, I think what we saw with this Jones extension is if they like the player, if they like what the player's doing on the field, and if they like the way the player's fitting into their scheme, we got a deal, right? I mean, that's what I learned in this one. Like, they're not afraid to talk in season and figure this out and extend somebody if they like what they're getting.
Yeah, this stretches back 2 years now. Obviously, they had a flurry of moves. Not so much, extensions, a couple extensions, but also just retaining guys in free agency last offseason, or not this past offseason, the one before. So this goes back to kind of since the start of Elliot Wolf's tenure as director of player personnel, whatever the title might be. He's running the show when it comes to the personnel department. So it's something that he very clearly believes in. And I think this one, if we look at all the extensions they've handed out in the last 2 years, this one I think has a chance to be the easiest and the best one that on the back end of it, just because he's a player who's going to age well. He plays in the slot. That's a role that you age out of eventually when your speed starts to go. You can't play there anymore. But he has experience playing safety. He's a good punt returner. Yeah. We've seen him on offense with the ball in his hands. Like, they're going to figure out a role for him. And at that number, he's a top 5 highest paid slot corner in the NFL. But at that number, in that position, you can figure out something to do with him. He's a valuable player to have on your team. So a good move by the Patriots. Now, if you look forward into free agency this season, nothing they really have to worry about. Maybe retaining a couple guys like Kayvon Chason, Kyrus Tonga. Other than that, they're in really good shape to carry over all the momentum they have right now into next season.
Yeah, and look, I mean, as you said, he's somebody who has an impact in multiple ways, out there on the field, right? And that's huge. I mean, if you have a guy who's versatile and can do different things for you, and is at that age where he's a good team player and he's going to be able to keep contributing, do it. Right? Like, why wait? Right. Why play that game that we've seen Dallas play way too many times, in waiting to lock up these critical players that you can help build around. And when you have a guy who can play multiple positions, they become a key component to your team. And Jones, the way he's played in the early going of this season, has demonstrated I can do a couple different things for you and do them well. So congrats to him. Sonic the Hedgehog, or what's your Halloween costume, Keagan? Just, off the top of your head.
So I hit the age this year where I'm in the middle ground. No kids, too far away from college. There's no Halloween costume, but I think it would be something similar. I walked through Macy's the other day and I saw it was just like a deer onesie, kind of like the Sonic onesie, and it's comfortable, it's efficient. You could wear it in the wintertime when you get cold. If I had to pick one, I would go with something like that. Multiple uses, I'm not a one-time use kind of guy. I need to get a couple out of it.
Yeah, you got to recycle. Yeah. I tell my kids, I'm like, can you go down to the basement? There's a big bin down there. Like, just find one. Yeah. Like, it's probably one your sibling has been, you haven't been. My daughter, by the way.
You can be a Dalmatian for the 4th straight year.
Yeah, she is going to be a deer. So she has one of those like lovely zip up hoodie type
Yeah.
cozy costumes that you're talking about. So she'll be rocking that on Halloween.
Great minds.
Yeah, there you go. Let's talk about some of the other moves that the Patriots made because, they kept one of their own and extended Marcus Jones. They also decided to move on from a couple guys yesterday. Kyle Dugger and a 7th-round pick to Pittsburgh in exchange for a 6th-round pick. Second trade of the day, of course. They also sent Keion White and a 7th-round pick to the 49ers for a 6th-round pick. Let's take these individually, Keagan. The Kyle Dugger one, look, I mean, we saw him get back on the field, obviously, and have an impact. We've also seen the fact that, like, he just doesn't seem to be the same player that he was, just because of injuries, just changing him, at least at this point in time. And it doesn't come as a huge surprise when you look at how much he's been out there, in Vrabel's system and the way in which this has gone. It's kind of like, Pittsburgh had a need. I can see how this one just makes sense.
Yeah, they were kind of forced into playing him. They really didn't want to. We talked about it on air and off air about that ankle injury that he suffered at the beginning of last year. It's changed who he is fundamentally as a player, and it stinks to see because he was such a big part of what you thought they were going to do moving forward early in his career, and then he started to kind of finally find his footing after Devin McCourty left. And then the injury hit. And it's been an up and down thing for him. So I think it was best for both sides to move on. Clearly he wasn't playing as much as the contract, would suggest he should be playing. And the Patriots didn't really need him to because they found a guy in Jalen Hawkins who's a journeyman and fits exactly what they want to do. And Craig Woodson has slid in. And really, that's where Dugger lost his job right there, was to a rookie who had a great understanding of what they were trying to do. He's younger. He doesn't have any of these, long-term injuries that you're worried about, and he doesn't have the money on his contract. So it made sense to get out from under the deal. 30 years old next year, Kyle Dugger. You might not think it. He 2020 draft pick, but he was a D2 guy. He played there for 5 years. A lot older than you might think. The contract never made sense in the first place, and then when you add in the regime change and the injury, it only made sense to get out from under it. And somehow, I don't know how this stuff happens, but 2 years taken off the contract just like that. He'll be a free agent at year's end. So a pick swap, late round pick swap, you move up like 15 spots in the draft. You give him a chance to go play somewhere else. It makes sense for all sides.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the money doesn't justify how much he's been on the field. Like it kind of becomes that simple, right? I mean, he's been out there like under, I think 40% of the defensive snaps this season. Obviously, the contracts, it's just too big. When you start looking at those numbers.
This is something that goes back to the days of Belichick, where he liked to keep things in a row where if you're being paid a certain amount of money, you need to produce, and if you're not, even if you're still producing at a decent level, I can't have you in the building making so much money where other guys are going to look and be like, he's making that much and he's doing what? It was a big thing with him, was the middle class. My roster's middle class is going to be rock solid, foundational pieces in the middle, and they just didn't have that with him. And I think that's something maybe Vrabel learned not only from playing under Belichick and being one of those guys who was a middle-class player and, had such a big role for the amount of money he was making. But in Tennessee, they were paying a lot of guys that weren't producing and weren't carrying out the term of the contracts they signed. So it's something that people learn eventually throughout the NFL, but it's going to happen. It happens every year with every team. Somebody just isn't playing up to the level of the contract that they signed, and it happened to be Dugger this year.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about Keion White because, again, the 49ers clearly had a need, at that position. I think my question on this one is, did you get enough in return, and do you need depth now there? Because that's something that we've also talked about so much, is this team does not have a ton of depth. And you're sitting here at 6-2 and are we going to get down the road and go, oh shoot, like it would have been helpful to have him.
Right. Yeah, it'd be nice to have Keion White. Yeah, it's something I wrote about for Nesson.com. Little plug. I did a kind of 6 trade packages that would make sense for the Patriots. And Keion White and Kyle Dugger were involved in 4 of the 6. They were clearly going to be traded. It was just a matter of who and when. And the White deal made so much sense with the relation to San Francisco. I had him going to San Francisco for one of 2 safeties. That didn't end up happening. It ends up being a late round pick swap. But this situation for Keion White specifically, he was such a poor fit in this system that they just wanted to get rid of him and not have to deal with him. It's like having a guy in the building that isn't going to help you. All that can do is hurt you. So they wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, and for let's just
whatever
not
they
think
were going
about
to
it
get
moving. Right, and that's what they did. I agree. A 6th round, and they might end up keeping the 7th round pick if Keion White's active for 7 games for San Francisco. The Patriots keep their 7th round pick. Who cares? It's a throw at the dartboard. But only getting that for a guy you draft.
Sometimes those picks win. Sometimes those picks are great,
For sure, right. Yeah, I would say if you look at the percentages, it's not great, but it could be, who knows?
Great,
maybe that guy ends up being a starting right guard for you for a long time. Mike Onwenu was a conditional pick that didn't convey, became their starting guard for, a half a decade at this point. So it made sense in the sense that you wanted to just get rid of the player, but what you got for him and what you might have been able to get had you waited, or had you really thought about it a little bit more with other teams that had things that they wanted to get out from underneath. I'm big on player for player trades. It never happens in the NFL, but I don't want this, you don't want that. Let's swap and see if it works kind of thing. That's what I was expecting. They didn't do that. But like you mentioned, this opens up a need now. They have no depth on the edge, zero. If Harold Landry or Caleb Chason get hurt, it's going to look really scary, and that defense is going to get significantly worse. So they need to go out and make a corresponding move to bring somebody in to fill that role. Keion White didn't fit it. Totally makes sense. You still have work to do.
Yeah. So I guess that takes us to, you mentioned it, you wrote a piece on this on Nesson.com. Look, I mean, everybody is, we've heard the running back talk, obviously, is this team going to go out? Are they going to find a way to get it back? We saw Travion Henderson have his best game as a Patriot this past weekend. We also saw him cough up the ball late in the game. So a little bit of a double-edged sword there. And then obviously, can you get some pass rush, right? I mean, can you get some pass rush? Which, I mean, there's a couple teams that aren't saying that across the National Football League, but for the most part, any team is welcome to add some pass rush, before November 4th. So, what are you hearing about what the Patriots are going to try to do here? And what do you think the likelihood is that we see them make some other moves, before the deadline on November 4th?
Yeah, they've essentially kind of figured it out at safety and running back. They signed a rookie safety off of the Miami Dolphins practice squad. He's going to be on the active roster. Then Saunders, thank you. I remembered it myself. So, Saunders is going to come in. He's going to be a contributor. Who knows if it's early or late. Richie Grant is a guy on the practice squad that they have a couple elevations left. So I think they feel pretty okay at safety. And then at running back, Terrell Jennings, there's a roster spot waiting for him, and that's a procedural thing. They'll eventually sign him to the active roster. They just signed 2 running backs to the practice squad, so they have depth there. Who knows if it's good depth, but there are bodies, in the building that they don't have to worry about the position. And then it's edge, and like I mentioned earlier, you have nothing at the edge when it comes to depth. Jelani Tavai is essentially your top edge depth player, and he's one of your starting middle linebackers. So good luck pulling a guy out there, and now you're swapping positions, and it becomes all convoluted and difficult. So if I had to place money on it right now, they're going to go trade for an edge guy. I don't think it's going to be one of the big names, Trey Hendrickson, whatever it might be, Max Crosby. It's going to be a guy we've both mentioned, Arden Key. It's going to be somebody like that. Draymond Jones, who's also in Tennessee, who doesn't fit the the 3-4 outside linebacker thing, but he's versatile. It kind of reminds me of Keion White. I don't know if it's necessarily a scheme fit, but he's definitely a better player at this point in their careers. And then it's, it's somebody who can rush the passer. So whoever you can name that's on a team that isn't worth anything right now and is just trying to get out from underneath contracts, it's one of those guys. I would imagine that they're in the market for one of those. But across the board, they're in pretty decent shape. And I think they like the guys in the building they have. Stephon Diggs has been spouting, we all we got, we all we need. He's been saying it like 45 times a game day for the last 3 weeks. I don't think they want to step on that. I don't think they want to make any significant moves, bringing guys in to kind of throw off the rallying cry, let's say, with their veteran and young players. They found something. Don't mess with it. You're not going to win the Super Bowl this year anyway. So just ride this thing until the wheels fall off. And I think they're willing to do that. But you do have to bring somebody in because the wheels will fall off a lot sooner if you don't.
Yeah. Could we see an extension with Kayshon Boutte?
Yeah, they should. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw the Marcus Jones extension was who's next? Who's next on the team? They've been doing it for a couple of years now. And if you look at his stats, the last 17 games, the back half of last year, the beginning of this year, 55 catches, I believe. He's around 800 yards, 7 touchdowns. Like that's one of the better number 2 wide receivers in the NFL. He's your number 1, obviously, right now. But if you can lock that guy in at a decent number for a few years, if he continues to develop, like the development we've seen from day 1 to right now, if he even takes a quarter of that and adds on to it, you're talking about a really, really good player. And I'm sure you could get him at a really good number with where he's at. So I would imagine they're going to start having conversations pretty soon here. He's the only guy in the receiver room that has earned an extension because, Stephon Diggs is locked into his money. Matt Collins is a guy that he is who he is. He's a journeyman and he'll have great weeks. He'll have weeks where he looks invisible. Demario Douglas hasn't done enough. Kyle Williams obviously is a rookie. So I think they start to think about approaching Kayshon Boutte for an extension. And if they do, and they get that done, you're good. You have nothing to worry about going into the offseason and you can really start to get creative with your money and bring in some players that will really push you over the top.
Yeah. I think, to me, it's edge, right? Like, can you find someone to bring in, in a way in which that it makes sense, contractually, it always takes at least 2 to make a deal happen. So, you got to find the willing partner as well. I mean, that's obviously part of it. So we'll see. I mean, Arden Key is certainly one to watch, right? I mean, he's on the final year of his contract, so like it's pretty clean in regard to that. But can you get it done? As I said, they're certainly not the only team looking to add some depth, at pass rush. So we'll see. All right, we're going to take a quick break. They are sitting there at 6-2, right? I mean, so at some point you got to start going, okay, we're the leader in the division. That's where Vrabel started saying, we got to win the division. Like that was goal number 1. They're in the driver's seat. At least sitting here, final few days of October, we're going to talk about how that spins forward and what that could mean for this team as we continue here on Foxborough Rush. Stick around, much more to come on your Wednesday.
I guess here's how I would answer the question. They've played 8 games. They've been in all 8 games, no matter which team they've played. And how many teams in the NFL can say that? Usually there's a dud in there, and they haven't had that yet. And to me, that's a sign of a good team.
Mike Reese there, longtime Patriots reporter for ESPN at this point in time. One of my favorite people, I will readily admit. He's terrific. But
maybe
look,
the nicest guy on the planet.
Yeah, he is among them, right? Like if you have to name like the nicest people on the planet, he is definitely up there. Look, but I think he's right. I mean, the Patriots have been in every single game that they've played. The one that they weren't in the most was probably that game against the Raiders, which now you look at the Raiders and you go, how in the world did that happen? But the the Steelers didn't come into Foxborough and beat the Patriots. The Patriots beat the Patriots that day. And
Right.
they've gotten a lot more consistent, I mean, I think, look, if offensively you can go out there on a day that Myles Garrett has a record 5 sacks and still wind up with what Drake May wound up with, and a double-digit win for the first time in NFL history for a player to have 5 sacks and lose by double digits. Come on,
Yeah.
like there's things that are clearly clicking for this team, and same goes defensively. In the second half, I mean, they absolutely brought it. Last weekend. So you have to like what you're seeing in terms of the development of this team, Keagan. The question then becomes, how far can you ride it, right? Like, how far
Right.
can you ride that development as you're sitting here today in first place in the division?
Yeah, like you have to assume eventually there will be some bumps in the road. And I think the thing that separates the Patriots from being a really good team and a great team is the depth. And, we obviously just had the conversation at edge, but there are a few positions where one guy goes down and things suddenly you start to panic. And I think that's the separator. That's the main thing that we haven't seen that yet, right? We haven't seen anybody at a key position go down for an extended period of time. No one's hoping for that. No one's, saying it's going to happen, but historically, if you look, eventually somebody is going to be lost for an extended period of time. And can you overcome that? That's the difference between a good team and a great team. Kansas City Chiefs, we just saw all of their wide receivers, at least the guys who were worth anything, had missed it 3, 4, 5 weeks, and they held water, and then now all of them are back and they look like world beaters again. The Patriots aren't in a position to do something like that. They're just not. So I think that's the separator. That's what makes them a good team, not a great team. So going into the deadline, you're not going to be able to fix all of the depth issues, but maybe a couple, maybe the ones that look like they're an immediate problem or could become an immediate problem. But I've kind of held serve for weeks at this point. I never expected them to be as good as they are, but I definitely don't expect them to get any better this season. I think they can continue to win the games that they're supposed to win. I think they can continue to knock off teams that are more talented than them. But once you start getting into the playoffs and the margin for error gets a lot smaller, obviously, later in the season, once the calendar turns, that's when you'll start to see the difference between what the New England Patriots are and what the Kansas City Chiefs are and the Buffalo Bills are. So I think there still is a gap between those teams. But they are in a good spot because moving forward, they will have plenty of opportunity to fill those gaps and continue to progress. The on-field progression has been there. Now it's about the roster progression and getting to a point where you match those other teams.
Yeah, I would say 2 things. I mean, sometimes you just get lucky, right? And it is 100% injury league, but some seasons, like, you just get lucky and you don't lose a guy for an extended period of time. So there is that, right? Sometimes, I mean, I've had executives say to me before, like, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right? Like, sometimes it just works that way. So, it, like, nobody's saying that couldn't happen. And the other thing is they are young, and a lot of times experience is what really counts, right? Like, we've seen, obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs have that. The Bills have it. Can they, get past the Kansas City Chiefs is always the question. But sometimes, like, you're young and you just don't know what you don't know. And that either can work against you or sometimes it can work for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there is a little bit of that too. So, sometimes you just hit it right and the schedule falls in a positive way for you. And look, everyone will say the Patriots have a cupcake schedule this season. I'm not denying that, and they're not in the AFC West dealing with, the Broncos and the Chiefs and the Chargers. Like, there's obviously a lot there to contend with, and that's not what the AFC East looks like at this point in time. But look, I mean, sometimes it works in your favor and things line up and you're better off lucky than good, in terms of expectations. And if you want to use that word, right? I mean, Mike Vrabel's like,
Yeah.
come on, like, are we really going to use that word? Let's hear from the Patriots head coach.
I don't think that that's fair to necessarily say exceeded any expectations. Try not to. I don't have expectations, right? We just have things that we want to try to focus on and improve on. I don't think that they. I think that they believe in themselves and that they believe that they're going to make some plays and that they're, not really panicking, and signs of complementary football and signs of preparation, and then some things that we have to continue to correct. And I think that that's really good when you can find ways to win and end the game with the football in your hand and kneeling on it. Those are things that I think good teams find a way to do. And we just have to, play a little better and keep improving. And, through this stretch here in the middle of the season where guys are banged up and there's, weeks kind of start to, the days, they kind of really just start to be similar. And I like the consistency of it. I just don't want guys to get, flat, or, some of these veteran guys that we got to be conscious of getting their bodies back in this time of year.
But, I think what's really likable there is just that, got to stay steady, got to figure out how to get each guy on the team what they need, whether it's, a harder practice or whether it's, a breather. You got to make sure that you're tending to individual needs while still building that collective team unit, that goes out there on game day, Keagan.
Yeah, it's from everything we've heard, they've done exactly that. They've balanced the differences in their roster between all of the young players they have and the veterans they have, and trying to make sure that everybody is in the same physical, mental, just condition going into game day. They've done a great job at that. I don't see why that would change, unless obviously the injury thing is a part of it. But in terms of preparation, I don't think anything's going to change. I think they have a really good head coach who knows the right buttons to push. He knows when to push them. And he knows that what he displays, the confidence or lack of confidence, whatever he displays is going to carry over onto his football team. So he's been the same guy every week in the interviews. Yeah. He almost focuses more on having fun with the interviewer than actually answering the questions. He's really good at it. He almost made himself fall asleep with that answer. Like he knows what he's doing. So they're in a good spot with the personnel they have in the building. I think they're looking forward to having him and the quarterback and a lot of these younger players on the roster be here for a long time.
Yeah. Yep. Great leaders, right? Deflect praise, absorb blame. That's it.
Right.
That is what to do. There's a couple guys who did it for a long time here in New England, and they did it better than arguably anybody else has ever done in the history of this game. We will talk about them on the other side with a gentleman who dove in and talked to lots of people. When I say lots, I mean like dozens of people behind the scenes with Brady and Belichick. That's coming up next right here on Foxborough Rush. Foxborough Rush coming back at you. Have you read it? Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate by Gary Myers, of course, who also wrote Brady versus Manning, going back a few. But look, I mean, what was the nature of that relationship between Brady and Belichick? How did it function? How and when did it falter? Gary dives into all of this, and he does it not only with his really just like readable, enjoyable prose, but he does it with so many interviews from inside to back it up. We're thrilled to have Gary Myers here with us on Foxborough Rush today. Gary, thanks so much for making the time and being with us. Congrats on the book that hit shelves last month. I have to start with this. Of all the people that you talked to, and I know it was an extensive list, what was the interview and the point that maybe stood out to you the most, that was like, man, I can't get this one out of my head?
Wow, that's a great question. I had a lot. Fortunately, there was a lot of really good interviews in the book. The guy that I really enjoyed talking to the most, who I should have known better during his career, because even though I worked in New York, I did a lot of those Jets Patriots games and certainly all the playoff runs. But the guy I never really got to know until I did the book was Devin McCourty, and what a gem he is! Oh my God, I know you guys know that, having dealt with him, but just really insightful and forthcoming and really informative and funny guy. And I really, really enjoyed talking to him. Charlie Weiss is a guy I've known forever, back from his days with the Giants. And I thought he was really insightful about the early years with Brady and how that all worked. And he, relaying the conversation that he had with Belichick on the sidelines before sending Brady out for that last drive in the first Rams Super Bowl. I thought that was really interesting to listen to. Belichick. Now, as with I did a book a couple of years ago called Once a Giant that Belichick loved helping me with, because he loved his Giant days, as you guys know. But he just kind of insisted on doing it by email when I had offered to meet. And he was still working for the Patriots at the time. I'd offered to meet him at 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whenever he wanted. And he said, I'm much better on email. I'll give you better answers on email. So I said, if that's the only way of getting it done, I'd rather do it face to face, but okay. And he was terrific on email. So this time around, I was just hoping he would cooperate because of the subject matter. I wasn't sure. And he was already at Carolina at that point, just starting out. And he goes, well, let's do it the same way as last time. And I had offered to meet him in Cape Cod, Nantucket, Chapel Hill, Boston, wherever. And he goes, let's do it by email. And his answers again were really good. And, one of them, got some traction, got some publicity, where he said he didn't blame Tom for going because he couldn't put the team around him anymore to compete. And, he didn't quite get back to me on the follow-up question. Well, it's not like Tom had a choice. You kind of pushed him out the door. But, if that's the way he wanted to remember it, so be it.
I do think, from being a part of it and being in it, we have a different point of view than maybe the people who will be buying the book and wanting to learn more about it do. The relationship between Tom and Bill is obviously a roller coaster ride. And one person who has been extremely outspoken about that is Tom Brady Sr. We've seen him, call into radio stations and write emails. I've gotten an email from Tom Brady Sr. He's very involved in his son's business, I'll say, or at least his public persona. How was it, not dealing with him, but having conversations with him because he's so passionate about this specific relationship? Did he give you kind of a new perspective because he's so close to Tom?
Well, I got to know him really well when I did the Brady Manning book in 2015. Yeah. And at that point, I really came to the conclusion in my own mind that he was saying what Tom, the quarterback, wanted to say but couldn't. And because Tom and Tom Sr. were so close, Tom was telling his dad everything. And, Tom was always very politically correct in his years in New England. And, he's become more outspoken, since he left in 2020. But Tom Sr. is kind of unfiltered when it comes to, talking about Belichick and talking about his son's years in New England and the disrespect that he felt he was receiving from Belichick. And he was great. I mean, there were sometimes he said things I felt I needed to protect him from himself, or maybe to protect him from his son, to get mad at him. But he was just, I'm telling you, I really do believe this, that he was saying a lot of things that his son was telling him, but, Tom just couldn't say himself. And that's why I gave him, pretty good form in the book, because, I pointed out in the book just what I just said, that I thought he was saying a lot of things that his son felt, but just wasn't able to say himself. And the level of animosity between Tom Sr. That he has towards Belichick is really astounding.
when you look at, I think the greatest thing about this question, Gary, is that there's no real answer to it in terms of, who deserves the credit. I think the reality is it's both of them. It's everybody around them. It's those that kept them, marching toward the common goal together throughout all of it, right? I mean, and that's what makes it such a great topic, is that you can go round and round and round on it. Where did you land in terms of how you felt about this Patriots dynasty and I don't know, the credit that is handed out?
Yeah, Jade, I think, first of all, Rodney Harrison was almost insulted by the question. Like, it wasn't just Brady, it wasn't just Belichick, it was all of us, right. And I understood how he felt. Guys who contributed a lot to it, didn't want to hear that. But this is how I ultimately came to a decision. Listen, I think it's Brady. It's not 80% Brady and 20% Belichick, and it's not 52-48, and it's certainly not 50-50, because I think that's kind of a cop-out. I think the key question that I had to answer in the book is what percentage to assign to each of them over the 20-year period. And in my mind, early on, it was certainly Belichick. I mean, although it was Dick Rabine that implored him to draft Tom, Bill has ultimately had the decision. So he's the one that brought him in. He's the one that kept him as a fourth-string quarterback as a rookie. He's the one who kept him on the field when Bledsoe went down and then 2 months later was ready to play again. So he had an awful lot to do with the early years, the early development of Brady and the success that the Patriots had during that period of time. I think the transition started in 2007, where we understood for sure that Brady was not a game manager anymore, that he was now the best quarterback in the league and potentially the best quarterback of all time, because in 2007, as you guys obviously remember, is when he threw the 50 touchdowns and the Patriots had the undefeated season and came within David Tyree's helmet of being 19-0 and being remembered as the greatest single-season team in NFL history. That's where I think it all changed, where it started to transition to being Brady. And if you split the dynasty up into, say, 2001 to 2010 and then 2011 to 2019, so two distinct, say 10-year periods there or whatever, I think it was almost entirely Brady for the second half of it. But Belichick deserves an awful lot of credit, much more than people want to give him, for how the thing got started. And they did need each other. There's no question. They wouldn't have had the same success apart that they had together. And that's kind of the fun thing, is trying to evaluate, who gets the credit for what.
I love that you're able to take the nuanced approach to looking at it, because a lot of people can't. Some people will just fully give all of the credit to one person and take it all away from the other. So I think it is important to do that. But when you talk to, the amount of people you interviewed, obviously directly involved, indirectly involved, who was the person that gave you the most surprising answer with who they picked or how they divvied up the credit?
Well, I think the most outspoken in support of anybody in the book was Rex Ryan, saying it was all Brady. Now, I think there was some ulterior motives there for Rex, because he's basically saying, give me Tom Brady and I'll win 6 Super Bowls also. And he still thinks he's a better defensive coach than Belichick was. But, as you know, Rex is very colorful. And, this book, I would tell any parent who wants their 10-year-old to read it, that maybe there's some words you want to cross out in the book where I quote Rex, because
little Sharpie.
Yeah, really. But Rex was really, very outspoken. One thing I want to point out, and maybe you guys could get to this, but I just want to make sure I make this point, is people are using the argument by saying it's Brady, by saying, look what they did after, from 2020 on. Tom goes to Tampa and wins the Super Bowl. Belichick struggles, makes the playoffs once, loses by 30 points, gets fired after a 4-13 season. Look what Belichick did before he had Brady, his years in Cleveland, and the first year plus 2 games in New England when Bledsoe started. Of course it's Brady, because look, Brady won without Belichick, and Belichick couldn't win without Brady. To me, that argument is completely 100% irrelevant in evaluating who gets the credit of what they did together. That's what this is about, is what they did together, not what they did apart. Tom handpicked the Bucs, who had a very strong defense, had excellent receivers, recruited Gronk, had a strong running game, a really good offensive line, and they just needed a quarterback, unlike Jameis Winston, who threw 30 interceptions the year before. I mean, the Bucs won 7 games with a quarterback who had 33 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. I mean, that's almost unheard of. And so they needed somebody. They needed a guy like Tom Brady. They didn't necessarily need a Hall of Famer. They just needed somebody to come in there and not throw 30 picks. And Tom went in and won a Super Bowl. But again, I guess the biggest, the most blame I put on Belichick in the post-Brady years is that he didn't have a succession plan in place at quarterback. He thought it was going to be Garoppolo. He never thought Brady was going to make it through 2019. Even if Brady pressured Belichick to get rid of Garoppolo, he wasn't going to be able to keep him through 2019 anyway, because Jimmy would have got antsy to play and they wouldn't have been able to pay him. But he just never went and drafted another quarterback after he traded Garoppolo.
Yeah. It's just like it was almost like I mean, it just like hit this wall, and it was like, okay, like there was just no movement forward at that point in time. I did think it was interesting that you did get to talk to Mo Lewis for this one, and he has really sort of like disappeared into the shadows. Carrie, I don't have to tell you that. And he was, he was pretty vocal in being like, quit blaming me for starting this tremendous dynasty, right? And I can't say as I blame the guy. I mean, he's just out there playing his position to the best of his ability.
Yeah, I mean, he lives outside of Atlanta, and he's kind of become a football recluse, if there's such a thing, where he doesn't have anything to do with the Jets anymore, and they have not put him in the Ring of Honor, even though he's one of the best linebackers in Jets history. I've suggested, since the Jets won't put him in the Ring of Honor, maybe the Patriots should. That's obviously a little tongue-in-cheek there. But, Mo was just doing his job. It was 3rd and 10. Bledsoe was running for a first down. Drew should have run out of bounds. Drew should have slid. Instead, he turned inside, and Mo was just waiting there for him, and it was, was approaching him with a full head of steam, and it was a clean hit. Even the way they protect quarterbacks now, I don't think that there would have been a flag thrown on it. But, it was a violent hit. And, Jet fans to this day still say, if it wasn't for that hit, the Patriots wouldn't have a dynasty. Now, I don't believe that, because Belichick did not like Bledsoe. And it was just a matter of time before he made the switch. Whether they would have won the championship in 2001, I don't know. It would have depended when Bill pulled the plug on Bledsoe, who, if you remember, just a few months earlier had signed a $100 million contract, and Kraft loved him, and they're moving into the new stadium the next year, and Kraft wanted the face of the franchise. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if, say, on October 10th of that year, if Belichick walked into Kraft's office and say, I'm really sorry. But the guy just signed a $100 million contract. I'm putting on the bench for a quarterback that you don't even know who he is.
He's out.
So that injury, it was the best thing to, no coach, even a coach who doesn't like his quarterback, wants to see any player get hurt, especially to the extent that Drew got hurt. But that was the best thing that ever happened to Belichick's career, and it was the best thing that ever happened to the Patriots. It's sad what happened to Drew, but, usually quarterbacks don't lose their job because of injury. But, 2 months later, the Patriots are winning, which they hadn't done with Bledsoe in a couple of years. And you can't really fault Belichick for sticking with Brady at that point.
You mentioned him a little bit there, but Robert Kraft is such a big piece of this, obviously. And I think he gets some of the credit from a lot of people. What about his role in the dynasty did you learn? Obviously, he wasn't a focal point of the debate, the Brady and Belichick debate, but what did you learn about his role, and how much credit do you give him?
Well, when I asked Garoppolo who gets the credit, Brady or Belichick, for the dynasty, his answer was Kraft. And I said, really? And he goes, well, I don't remember exactly the phrasing, but basically he was saying he put out a lot of fires and to keep it going as long as that he did. And that's definitely true. I think Robert was very instrumental in convincing Brady to take the undermarket contracts because it gave Belichick an opportunity to keep the team strong around him. But, ultimately I thought that was the breaking point for Brady is he was saving Belichick all the salary cap money, and then Belichick was going ahead and wasting it on bad free agent signings and bad draft choices. But I thought that Kraft was very instrumental behind the scenes in making sure this thing worked as long as possible. And one thing that I actually picked up from the Dynasty documentary that I thought was really interesting was how after the whole Malcolm Butler fiasco, by Belichick not playing him against the Eagles in that Super Bowl and Nick Foles turning into Dan Marino in that game or into Joe Montana, and then Belichick never to this day explaining why he benched Butler. Well, Kraft basically had Belichick on double secret probation going into the 2018 season. And he has said that Belichick proved to him in that Rams Super Bowl by holding that team to 3 points that he still had it in him as a coach. And then so we had to make a choice the following summer when Tom went to him and wanted a new contract, and Belichick said, I don't think we should do that. He doesn't have much left. Based on what happened in that Rams Super Bowl, Kraft sided with Belichick instead of Brady. And he has since said, not in the dynasty necessarily, but he has since said that he regrets that decision, that he should have kept Tom and gotten rid of Belichick. And so you wonder, did he sell out the Patriots to an extent, trading that one Super Bowl that Belichick was able to win against the Rams, and in turn, that basically was the end of, after one more season, that was the end of Brady. If they hadn't won that Super Bowl, had been eliminated earlier in the playoffs, he probably would have fired Belichick, kept Brady, and then who knows what would have happened to New England. Maybe they wouldn't have won anything with Tom anyhow because the talent level had certainly slipped. But maybe they would have brought in somebody new who could have built it back really quickly also, and then Tom could have finished his career in New England like everybody always thought that he would.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about that, right? And I mean, we'll never know what could have been had it gone that way. But it is an interesting exercise to go back and think like, oh man, like if that had, you start to play dominoes a little bit. Gary, I'm curious, just given how close you are to all the different players, personalities that were part of the dynasty here in New England, and then watching, Kansas City these days, right? I mean, the Chiefs all of a sudden, they get everybody back. Their defense is, arguably playing significantly better than it has other years where they've gone on to the Super Bowl, and they're looking to make it 4 straight trips to the Super Bowl. How do you compare the two dynasties, the one in New England that was and the one that currently is in Kansas City?
Well, I think the one in Kansas City, is still a work in progress because as dominant as they've been for the last 7 years since Mahomes took over, they're only, in terms of winning championships, they're only halfway there to Brady and Belichick. And we saw by what happened against the Eagles 8 or 10 months ago that repeating as champions is very difficult. So, and they were trying to three-peat, and I'd say that let's check back in 7 or 8 years and see how many more rings that they have before we, put them on the same level. I mean, certainly they are the new dynasty in the NFL. And, I was hesitant to call anybody else a dynasty based on what they've done so far. A dynasty is sustained over such a long period of time, and it hasn't been that long. They've certainly dominated this particular era of the NFL. But you're right, Jade. I mean, they look like a completely different team right now than they did, even at the beginning of the season, and certainly different than they looked in that Super Bowl against the Eagles when they got, annihilated. As long as Mahomes stays healthy and Andy continues to be motivated enough to continue coaching, then you'd have to say they're a threat to what the Patriots have done. But until they do it, they haven't done it. And it takes so much to win a championship. You have to avoid injuries. You have to avoid what happened with them, like Rashee Rice getting suspended for so many games. You got to avoid those pitfalls because we saw against the Eagles in the Super Bowl that you surround Mahomes with a bad offensive line and not enough skill position players, and Kelsey seemed to be on the downside, especially in that game, that he can't do it by himself, like Brady couldn't do it by himself. So they got a ways to go. But obviously, there's no other team currently that you can compare to the Chiefs and say, this could be the next dynasty. Baltimore, has been very disappointing in the playoffs. Buffalo, the same way. One of those teams has got to break through at some point to prevent Kansas City from continuing, to get to the Super Bowl every year.
Yeah. To be continued, as always, right? That's the great thing about this league.
Yeah.
Gary Myers, we really appreciate the time today and the perspective. Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate. You can find it wherever you find your books. Amazon is usually the easiest, of course, at least in my house. But Gary, we really appreciate the time, and thanks for being with us here on Foxborough Rush.
Yeah, Jade, Keagan, thank you very much for having me on. I enjoyed talking to you guys.
Thanks, Gary.
We'll be back with more right after this. Got to dive into the book, right, Keagan? I mean, Gary Myers, I thought he was terrific.
Yeah, thanks to Gary. He got us copies of the book, so we will be reading, and I'll give you a review next time.
I love it. We'll see you next time right here on Foxborough Rush, 10 o'clock Friday morning.